My name is Melissa Carter. I'm 58 years old, and until that fateful afternoon, I was the head of compliance at Westbridge Systems one of the largest electronics manufacturing firms in the Midwest. I had worked there for nearly 3 decades, exactly 28 years and 361 days. I knew every corner of the operation, every financial report, every irregularity, because I was the one responsible for making sure everything ran by the book, to standard, with nothing overlooked. My office was on the 8th floor, almost entirely separate from the technical and admin wings. Quiet, sunlit, and so impeccably organized that people used to jokingly call it the truth box. I've always believed that integrity is the last thing you hold on to, when everything else gets swept away. That Wednesday afternoon, it was lightly raining. I was finishing up the Q2 internal audit checklist when the admin assistant walked in and handed me a slip of paper. "The CEO wants to see you, 10th floor conference room, right now." I looked up. "Was this scheduled?" "No, but he said you'd understand." "Why?" My heart sank slightly. In almost 30 years at Westbridge, I'd never been summoned to the 10th floor without an appointment. That floor wasn't for casual meetings. It was where big decisions, or irreversible ones, were made. I walked into the conference room, where Walter Grant, the recently appointed CEO, just under a year into the job, was already waiting. He was the kind of man whose soft voice somehow sent a chill. On the table sat a slim leather folder, positioned with such precision it made me wary. "Melissa," he smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. "How long have you been with us?" I kept my voice steady. 28 years and 361 days. "Nearly 3 decades. That's admirable." He nodded and gently slid the folder toward me. "Unfortunately, today will be your last." I looked at him, saying nothing. I didn't need to open the folder to know what this was. "Staff reduction," he said, almost like an exhale. "Operating costs are tightening. The board had to make some tough calls." I didn't react. I just listened. Every word he spoke felt like an icy blade. Not because it surprised me, but because of how calculated it was. I knew the truth. Next Monday, just 3 days away, all my retirement benefits, everything I'd worked my life to earn, would fully vest. 3 days. I stared at him, eyes unflinching. "So, this is final." Walter hesitated, perhaps caught off guard by my calm. "I know this is hard to accept, but I hope you'll sign the severance agreement. It's fairly generous, given the circumstances." I didn't touch the folder. I stood. "Thank you for informing me." He looked surprised. Maybe he was used to tears, begging, panic, but not from me. I'd reviewed thousands of lines of data over the years. I knew when something smelled rotten. And that room reeked. I left the 10th floor and stepped into the elevator like someone waking up from a long dream. The fluorescent light above flickered softly. I thought, I've always prepared for the worst, but not for betrayal. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a firing. This was a calculated strike, a plan designed to erase my life's work without leaving a trace. I returned to my office in silence, the glass door clicking shut behind me like a cold full stop. Inside, everything was the same. The weekly planner, my half-drunk coffee, the file I'd been reviewing. But I knew, after today, nothing would be the same. On the desk sat the folder Walter had given me, as if someone had already placed it there. Bold print on the cover, internal severance agreement. I flipped through a few pages. My eyes stopped at clause 12. The employee agrees to waive any right to sue, dispute, or pursue financial claims, including but not limited to pensions and accrued dividends from the time of signing. I set it down, calm. Everything was clear. They weren't cutting budgets. They were cutting me out. A plan, calculated down to the hour, the day. If I signed before 5 p.m. tomorrow, I'd get 3 months' pay. If I didn't, nothing. No pension, no insurance, no proof of 28 years of service. I picked up the phone and called Kelly. our HR assistant. "Melissa!" Her voice shrank when she heard mine. "Just one question," I said gently. "How many others were let go today?" A pause. "Just you, ma'am." I gave a faint smile. "I see." I hung up before she could say more. My hand tightened around the phone, not from fear, but from clarity. This was a personal elimination, and I was the target. I packed in silence. A photo of my late husband, Henry, gone 8 years now from a long illness. The ceramic mug my daughter gave me on my 50th birthday, scribbled with, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." And the framed certificate honoring my 25 years of service, the one they now wanted me to forget like a spilled ink stain. I left the building, escorted by a security guard I didn't even know. He said nothing except, "Have a good afternoon." The rain had stopped. I sat in my car for a long time, listening to the wipers push away the last drops. My mind wasn't chaotic like I thought it would be. Instead, I felt sharply awake. I drove home through familiar streets, past the bookstore Henry and I used to visit every weekend, past the coffee shop where I met my book club friends. There was a creeping sense of loss, but I wouldn't let it swallow me, not today. The moment I stepped inside, I poured a glass of water and sat at my desk. I opened Walter's folder, laid out every document, and photographed each page. I wasn't going to sign, but I was going to document every word, every timestamp, every phrase, even the handwritten note from Walter on the final page. "I hope you understand. This is best for everyone." Best for whom? I opened the safe in the corner of my study and pulled out a file I'd kept for 4 years. Memos, emails, copies of financial reports I'd archived whenever something felt off. I had suspected but never confirmed, until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I discovered a shipment worth over $3 million. 0 cents had been sent without any valid inspection certifications. When I asked, I got a chilling reply from management. "Don't complicate things, Melissa. Just trust that the system is working." And now that system had moved to remove me. I'm not someone who seeks confrontation, but I believe in truth. And this time, the truth wasn't in that severance packet. It was in the numbers they tried to bury. I opened my laptop, typed in my password, and began an email. Recipient: Andrew F. Walters. An old friend, former investigator with the Office of the Inspector General, now a special advisor at the Treasury Department. Subject: urgent, internal, concerns at Westbridge Systems. I don't know what will happen after this email, but I know one thing. They tried to silence me, and they picked the wrong person. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because my mind wouldn't stop working. I sat in my study, the soft yellow desk lamp casting light over years' worth of carefully sorted and marked documents. Someone once asked why I kept everything so meticulously. I always said, occupational habit. But deep down, I had known something wasn't right for a long time. Westbridge Systems was never a perfect company, but ever since leadership changed in my 24th year there, something had started to go murky. Temporary expenses, adjustments in quarterly revenue reports, and last-minute approval requests late in the workday. None of it felt coincidental anymore. I opened the safe again, not to double-check documents this time, but to find an old business card I had tucked away in a leather notebook. Henry's anniversary gift to me on our 20th year together. The card was slightly faded. Jonathan Miles, Senior Investigator, SEC Chicago Division. Jonathan had worked on a joint project with Westbridge 7 years ago. Back then, he was an external auditor. Kind, but sharp as a blade. We'd clashed over a few reports, but I respected how he never compromised with loopholes. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, and stopped at one name. Miles, SEC. I wasn't sure if he still used the number, but I called anyway. After 3 rings, a deep and tired male voice answered. "Hello? Jonathan, it's me, Melissa Carter." A pause, then a soft chuckle. I figured I'd never hear your voice again. What's going on, Melissa? Are you still with the SEC? I'm an independent investigative consultant now, but I still collaborate on special cases. Why? I took a deep breath. I need to talk. Something serious is happening at Westbridge, and I have proof. His tone shifted instantly. What kind of proof are we talking about? The kind that could keep a boardroom up at night. I need to meet with you as soon as possible. We arranged to meet the next morning at a law office in suburban Evanston, a place discreet enough to stay under the radar, but formal enough for me to safely present everything. That morning, I wore a light gray suit, the one I saved for board meetings. I brought 3 file binders organized by year, along with a backup USB drive, encrypted. Jonathan was already there. He no longer had the thick brown hair I remembered, but the sharpness in his eyes hadn't faded. When I laid the folders on the table, he stared at me for a moment before asking, his voice more serious than it had been the night before. Are you sure you want to go through with this, Melissa? If this is what you say it is, we're not talking about an isolated case. This would trigger a federal investigation. I nodded without hesitation. I don't want to. But they left me no choice. For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything. Emails, reports, timelines. From requests to align data with media strategy, to backdated quality certifications, to vague representation expenses, with no documented destination. When I finished, Jonathan leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the pile in front of him. They terminated you before your retirement kicked in, didn't they? 3 days before, I said flatly. He nodded. That's the dumbest thing they've ever done, and it might be what brings their entire system down. I said nothing, but inside I knew. This was the point of no return. Jonathan continued, I'm sending this directly to the Office of Special Investigations in D.C. I'll need you to stay in close contact. And Melissa? Don't sign anything, no matter how many times they call. I nodded. I won't sign. I spent nearly 3 decades doing things by the book. I won't let them take it all away with a trap disguised as paperwork. When I left the office, the sun was high. A soft breeze lifted my hair, and I felt lighter than I had in days. Not because anything was resolved, but because, finally, I had acted. And this time, the truth wouldn't be brushed aside again. Monday morning, I arrived at the Federal Building in downtown Chicago, where Jonathan had arranged a meeting with the SEC investigation team. I brought 3 boxes of documents and a hard drive containing over 1,000 pages of evidence. Everything cataloged by timeline and severity. Every note, every email, every signed report. Preserved because I had a gut feeling this day would come. The investigative team was waiting in a glass-walled conference room, the bright white lighting reflecting off dry erase boards lining the walls. Alongside Jonathan were 2 others. Lisa Moreno, lead counsel for internal investigations, and Brent Hutchins, financial data analyst, his face as serious as if every number was a red flag. Let me be clear, Lisa began after a handshake. From this moment on, everything you share with us becomes part of a formal federal investigation. It cannot be withdrawn. Are you sure you want to proceed, Melissa? I nodded firmly. I've already lost everything. They didn't give me any other option. Jonathan opened the first box, flipping through documents with laser focus. Brent connected the hard drive to his laptop, scanning the files I had organized. Falsified revenue reports, executive emails pushing for inflated profit margins, personal logs of suspicious meetings. Within 30 minutes, the room was silent. Just the sounds of keystrokes, pages turning, and the occasional sigh. Brent looked up first, locking eyes with me. Do you realize what you've brought us? All I know is those numbers aren't honest, and I can't keep pretending not to see it. Lisa nodded slowly. Westbridge inflated revenue by at least 18% over the past 2 years. Your files match internal tax filings we've had concerns about. But what interests me most is what happened before David Langston arrived. I nodded and slid another binder toward her. The misconduct didn't start with Langston, he just took it further, but the earliest signs began under the previous CEO, Harold Brantley. Jonathan nodded slowly. I've heard that name. Brantley left quietly, no questions asked. But it sounds like we need to revisit everything. I turned to an old email thread, exchanges between Brantley and the former head of finance requesting a minor adjustment to quarterly numbers to maintain shareholder confidence. Brent stared at the screen. This isn't short-term fraud. This is a systematic financial misrepresentation strategy. Lisa closed the binder. We'll be issuing a formal inquiry to Westbridge's executive board immediately. We'll also contact the regional U.S. Attorney's office. But Melissa, she paused, locking eyes with me, you'll need legal counsel. And from this point on, do not contact anyone at Westbridge directly. All communication will go through us. I understand, I said, voice calm but resolute. I'm not going back there. Jonathan stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. I know this isn't easy, but from now on, you're not alone. As I left the building, April sunlight lit the granite steps beneath my feet. People hurried past, unaware that a middle-aged woman had just launched one of the largest financial investigations in the Midwest's manufacturing industry. I don't know what lies ahead, but I know one thing. The silence is over. 3 days after that meeting with the SEC team, my phone started ringing non-stop from early morning. Unknown numbers, no voicemails. I didn't answer. I knew exactly where those calls were coming from. By late morning, an email popped up in my personal inbox. Urgent. Letter from the Westbridge Systems Executive Board. I opened it, and just the first line told me everything was starting to shift. Dear Ms. Melissa Carter, we hereby inform you that the decision to terminate your employment on the 17th has been fully revoked. You are reinstated as a full employee, along with all associated benefits, including your pension and insurance program. Just beneath that, in faint italics, we would also like to discuss with you a potential special advisory role during the upcoming restructuring phase. I sat still for a few minutes, not because I was surprised, but because of how pitifully they were managing the crisis. There was no apology, not a single line admitting wrongdoing. Just damage control dressed up as goodwill. I called my attorney, Donna Reynolds, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 60s who never trusted anything that came with a friendly handshake. I read the email aloud to her. She scoffed. Do they really think you'd be thrilled and jump right back in? They're trying to save face, I replied. They know the SEC is digging. And they're desperate, Donna said, because they know you can bring down their entire structure. We agreed not to respond immediately. Instead, Donna sent a brief legal notice. Miss Melissa Carter will not participate in any discussions without her legal counsel and independent investigative representatives present. That afternoon, a member of the board, Mr. Russell McMahon, called my landline at home. He didn't leave a message. When I picked up, he kept it short. Melissa, I hope you understand. We were just following protocol. No one on the board truly wanted you gone. We were under pressure. I cut him off. Pressure from whom, Mr. Russell? From yourself? Or from the man your board voted to install? We should speak in person. About a mutually beneficial arrangement. I paused, then answered firmly. I'll meet. But not at your offices. And I'm not coming alone. 2 days later, the meeting took place at a neutral law office in Chicago. I came with Donna and a representative from the SEC, just as we had stipulated. Their side included 3 people, Russell, the head of legal, and David Langston. The man who cost me my career now sat across from me, looking tired, his neatly combed hair unable to hide the tension of dealing with media storms and mounting investigations. Russell spoke first. We regret that things unfolded this way. Miss Carter, the board wishes to make amends. We'd like to offer you a consulting role, double the salary, remote work, full scheduling autonomy. I'm not here to negotiate employment, I cut him off. I'm here to be clear. I'm not signing any gag order. I'm not returning in exchange for silence. I want a full investigation, and public, if necessary. David looked at me, his eyes vacant. Maybe he never believed I'd have the courage to bring it all into the light. Melissa, this doesn't have to go that far. You took away 28 years of my career with one signature, I said. If you think I'll come back and pretend like nothing happened, you've clearly underestimated me. Donna slid a document across the table, prepared by the SEC. A list of 17 formal requests requiring Westbridge's official response, including full budget approval processes, 5 years of financial reports, and all meetings involving revenue adjustment strategies. None of the three dared to sign on the spot. You're not willing to cooperate with the board to resolve this internally? Russell asked one last time, a mix of desperation and arrogance in his tone. I tried to do that for 4 years, I answered without hesitation. But when I needed the board, no one spoke up. Now it's time I let the truth speak for itself. I stood, left the room, and didn't look back at their uneasy faces. I wasn't after revenge. I just wanted the truth to come out. And now, the wheels of justice were in motion. And wouldn't stop, just because of a few hollow promises. 3 days after that tense meeting, I sat quietly in my home office, unlocking my personal safe. There was one file I hadn't handed over to the SEC. Not because I forgot, but because I was waiting for the right moment. And now, with Westbridge showing signs of panic, that moment had arrived. The file had a red label, handwritten in black ink. Internal correspondence, Q3 and Q4 Brantley era. Inside were printed emails between Harold Brantley, former CEO of Westbridge, and 3 board members from that time: Russell McMahon, Linda Rowe, and Carlton Daniels. The contents didn't just show that they were aware of report adjustment tactics. They revealed they were directly instructing the finance department to legitimize fictitious revenue. One attachment from the former head accountant even suggested allocating unrealized profits to the current quarter to maintain shareholder confidence. I sent the entire file to Jonathan and Lisa with a short note. I think it's time we complete the full picture. Jonathan called me almost immediately. Melissa, this isn't just adding fuel to the fire, this is the match. And I'd say, I replied calmly, it's time to strike it. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. But I didn't need to. Over 10 financial news sites ran the headline. Expands investigation into Westbridge Systems. Board members implicated. Investors demand transparency, and Westbridge stock plunged 30%. The next morning, the Wall Street Bulletin devoted its front page to the story. The bold headline read, Whistleblower, at 58 Melissa Carter and the fight for truth. They didn't call me a victim. They called me the one who stood up. By noon, 4 Westbridge executives submitted their resignations. Russell, Linda, and Carlton among them, the same names found in the documents I'd just released. The 4th was Doris Meeks, Director of Communications, who had overseen the PR team's efforts to craft a narrative of positive recovery. I heard the news in a call from Donna, her voice carrying a smile. You did what an entire external audit committee couldn't. Brought down a crumbling power structure from the inside. And David Langston? I asked. Donna paused, then said, officially terminated this morning. No severance, no honors, no farewell. I didn't celebrate. I simply stepped out onto the back porch and sat on the wooden chair Henry once built. A soft May breeze moved through my hair, carrying the scent of change, the scent of truth finally stepping out of the shadows. The media kept digging. Major investors demanded direct talks with the SEC. Some proposed a class action suit for prolonged lack of transparency resulting in financial losses. A partner bank announced it was suspending all cooperation until the investigation concluded. Westbridge, once seen as a symbol of stability in the Midwest manufacturing sector, was now scrambling to salvage what little reputation it had left. Jonathan texted me. They're trying to save the building, but the foundation's already rotted. I replied, Then at least let them clean up the rubble the right way. This story is no longer about me. It's become a message. A wake-up call to those who believed silence would always serve power. And I, a 58-year-old woman once cast out for telling the truth, am now living proof that the opposite is just as powerful. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in years, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer alone. 6 months after I walked out of that law office with the final batch of evidence, I sat in a federal courtroom, facing the other side of the long table covered in blue felt. David Langston entered first. Same expensive suit, same arrogant stride, but this time, his eyes didn't dart around. They were simply empty. Behind him came Carlton Daniels and Linda Rowe, 2 of the 3 board members who used to smile at me during quarterly meetings. They said nothing, walking in quietly like forgotten pawns at the end of a chess game. And then they sat, together, in the defendant's seats. The judge read the charges: securities fraud, falsifying financial statements, and withholding material information from investors. The evidence gathered by the SEC, including the documents I provided, left no room for doubt. In front of federal prosecutors, reporters, and major investors, all 3 admitted to their wrongdoing. There were no outbursts, no justifications. I looked at David, the man who had cast me aside like I was just another name on a layoff list. Our eyes met for a fleeting second, just long enough for me to see it. Not guilt, but defeat. After the hearing, I was brought into a private office to receive official notice from the CCC. Lisa, who had led the investigation from the very beginning, gave me a quiet smile and handed me a thick envelope, along with a document sealed in red. Whistleblower Award. Under SEC Whistleblower Protection Provisions. I opened it and could hardly believe my eyes. 15% of the total fines collected from the case. Enough to live the rest of my life without worrying about insurance, medical bills, or retirement. Donna, my attorney, stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. You saw it through. Now it's time to rebuild, on your terms. That evening, I sat in the warm kitchen of the lakeside cabin I had moved into after everything settled. This was the home Henry and I once dreamed of, though we never got the chance to make it real. Until now, I had turned it into reality. A quiet place, where golden afternoon light spilled through the windows, waves lapped gently on the shore, and memories of the only man who ever told me, "Your attention to detail isn't a weakness, it's your superpower." And I decided to do something in his name. 3 months later, the Henry Carter Scholarship Fund was officially established. Its goal, to support women pursuing careers in ethics and corporate compliance fields, often dismissed as dull or unglamorous, yet which I believe are the moral backbone of any economic system. The launch ceremony was small but dignified, held at my alma mater. As I stepped up to speak and saw the faces of young students smiling at me with admiration, I felt something I hadn't in nearly 3 decades. I hadn't been pushed out of the old world. I was opening a new door for the next one. My story didn't end with a verdict or a payout. It continued through scholarship letters from young women saying they wanted to stand up for transparency. Notes of gratitude from single mothers, or from a Latina student who said she never thought she could study finance until she read my story. I was no longer Melissa fired 3 days before retirement. I was Melissa Carter, the woman who chose not to stay silent. And that, I knew, would outlast any court case, any number, any corporation. And on quiet afternoons, when my granddaughter runs giggling through the yard and laughter echoes through the pine trees, I smile quietly. Because I didn't let my life end with a period. I turned it into a reminder. The truth can be buried, but it never disappears. 1 week after the trial ended, I received a FedEx envelope from Westbridge Systems. Inside was a 3-page letter printed on gold-trimmed letterhead, signed by interim CEO Patricia Donovan. On behalf of the new board, She offered a sincere apology and invited me to return as a strategic ethics advisor with full schedule flexibility, a private office, and an unlimited compensation package. I read every line, folded the letter, and placed it in the drawer where I'd once kept my very first employee badge from 28 years ago. Not out of nostalgia, but because I understood. A chapter had ended, and I didn't need to go back to know I had done the right thing. I sent back a short, polite, but firm reply. I am not seeking titles or compensation. What I needed, I have already received. Not from the company, but from my conscience. I will not return. I wish you well in rebuilding a kinder Westbridge. Afterward, I began working with the SEC in several legislative organizations, joining advisory teams on whistleblower protection policy at both state and federal levels. We discussed ways to expand legal support, streamline response protocols, and, most importantly, prevent the kind of subtle retaliation I endured. At 59, for the first time, I was sitting on the other side of the table, not to defend, but to decide. At a policy conference in Washington, D.C., a young compliance officer approached me, eyes brimming with emotion. I was thinking of quitting after discovering misconduct at my company, she said. But then I read about you, and I realized, speaking up isn't destruction, it's repair. Thank you for not backing down. I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't the first, I replied. I'm just one of many who stopped being afraid. Now it's your turn. The rest of the week, I live quietly in my Michigan lakeside cabin, Henry's dream retirement spot with me. In the mornings, I brew coffee and sit on the porch, watching the sun rise over the still water. In the evenings, I walk with my granddaughter, listening to her talk about school and how she dreams of becoming a therapist, so people who feel unheard will finally be listened to. Every weekend, my daughter Rachel visits with her husband and kids. The little ones play in the yard while we gather around the grill, stitching memories together, laughing more than crying. Rachel once told me, "Mom, you're not just a symbol of integrity. You taught me how to stand tall, even when the wind is against you." And I know that's the greatest reward I've ever received. Sometimes the media still brings up my story, in business ethics panels or policy reform reports. One magazine once called me the woman who made the system stop and look at itself. But I never let that title pull me away from real life. I'm still Melissa Carter, the woman who quietly checked every number, every report, and who, when something was wrong, refused to look away. Once, during a national radio interview, the host asked me, "If you could go back, would you stay silent to stay safe?" I answered without hesitation. I lost my job, nearly lost my reputation, and faced a long season of loneliness. But if I had to do it again, I'd still choose the truth. Because some things, like dignity, aren't worth trading for any pension. Now, my story isn't just a case file, it's a symbol. For anyone who's ever felt alone in a dangerous system. I no longer need to prove anything to anyone. I just need to keep living in alignment with who I am, as I always have, and trust that somewhere, someone standing at the crossroads between silence and speaking up might hear this quiet reminder. You are not alone, and the truth will always find a way to be heard. My story isn't just a fight for justice. It's proof that even when the truth is buried deep, it still rises. I was once dismissed, called a problem, but my resolve and ethics turned me from someone forgotten into a symbol of integrity. Today, I live peacefully with my family, helping build stronger protections for whistleblowers, so no one ever has to choose between their career and the truth the way I once did. What do you think about Melissa's choice? Would you have the courage to stand up like she did? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, inspiring stories about family and integrity.